Funeral for Cardinal Law. The Vatican lays to rest the former Archbishop of Boston. We have a report from Rome. Vote at the UN. The White House threatens to take away aid to countries that don't support the Jerusalem decision. Pep Talk. The Holy Father gives his annual Christmas greeting to his staff in the Holy See. We'll tell you why his speech is ruffling feathers. And hitting a high note. A group of nuns from Michigan has the #1 selling Christmas record. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, December 21st, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Pope Francis prays for a merciful final judgment for Cardinal Bernard Law during the funeral mass for the disgraced former Archbishop of Boston. The Dean of the College of Cardinals, Cardinal Angelo Sodano, celebrated the funeral mass along with other cardinals. Law died Wednesday in Rome, where he spent his life after revelations he covered up for dozens of priests who abused children. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. Edward, who attended Cardinal Law's funeral mass this afternoon?
Well, it was attended by the American cardinals here in Rome, Cardinal Burke, Cardinal O'Neill, and Cardinal Harvey, but also the ambassador here, the new ambassador to the Holy See, Ambassador Callista Gingrich and her husband Newt. And there were other various dignitaries, senior Vatican officials, Cardinal Parolin, the Secretary of State, and also about 250 people in the congregation, but it wasn't a full congregation, and it was in a side altar, which is where often these funerals are held in St. Peter's Basilica.
Well, tell us about Cardinal Sodano's message during the funeral. Did he address the abuse issue?
He didn't, at least not directly, and he spoke about entrusting the soul of Cardinal Law to the merciful love of the Father. He spoke about the dedication of Cardinal Law to 56 years of pastoral service, and he said that throughout his life he'll have been seeking the face of the Lord, which he'll now have the opportunity to do. But there was no real reference, to the sexual abuse issue, which of course hampered his life during the last years of his life.
I imagine it is a very sensitive issue for so many people. One of the hallmarks of Pope Francis' pontificate is reform and the protection of minors. The Vatican has a committee now focused on that issue. What has the group been doing, and is it making progress?
Well, its purpose is really to help prevent further abuse and to deal more effectively with these abuse cases. It was set up under Pope Francis, but it's been criticized for lacking a sense of urgency. It's also been criticized for wanting to set up a tribunal to try bishops like Cardinal Law, who were accused of covering up sexual abuse cases, but that tribunal was then scotched. And then it's just, people say, well, it's not really doing what it should have been doing, and that it's actually lapsed, that there aren't any renewals of members, at least until April, which is when the Vatican says that there will be more appointments made. But there has been criticism, which is kind of in contrast to the rest of the Church, which has been largely applauded for its dealing with this issue, certainly in the last few years.
Sure, certainly, and I know that so many members of the Church are continuing to work on this issue and will continue in the decades ahead. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, thanks so much.
Thanks, Wyatt.
The United States imposes sanctions on Myanmar for the first time since the countries began repairing relations 5 years ago. The Department of Treasury is targeting 13 people worldwide for human rights abuse. Among them is General Maung Maung So, the army chief responsible for the same region where the White House says Myanmar has been carrying out ethnic cleansing of Rohingya Muslims. The United Nations condemns America's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. The Trump administration fights back, threatening to cut funding to the UN and any country that voted against the U.S. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. Today, 128 countries, an overwhelming majority, voted yes to a UN resolution which declares the president's decision null and void. But a yes on that vote could mean a no to U.S. aid.
They take hundreds of millions of dollars and even billions of dollars, and then they vote against us. Well, we're watching those votes. The voting has been completed.
The votes came one after another at today's UN General Assembly. The majority of the world opposed to Trump's announcement recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
Let them vote against us. We'll save a lot. We don't care.
Today, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley came out swinging, backing up her boss, saying the United Nations has long been a hostile place to the state of Israel, and the U.S. won't forget today's vote.
And we will remember it when so many countries come calling on us, as they so often do, to pay even more and to use our influence for their benefit.
The Palestinians asked the General Assembly to intervene after Haley vetoed a UN Security Council resolution calling on Trump to retract his Jerusalem decision. Palestinians claim East Jerusalem as their capital. At the White House, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders would not confirm to me if the U.S. will cut funds to the countries who oppose the president.
Is it appropriate that the President and Ambassador Haley keep making those threats to cut aid?
I think it's appropriate for the President to put America first and focus on the safety and security of Americans.
The President says recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital is an acknowledgement of a historical reality. Critics say the move will hurt the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Pope Francis also disagreed with the President's decision. Wyatt?
Correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. A potential Supreme Court fight over whether a pregnant immigrant teenager in U.S. custody can have an abortion has been avoided for now. The Trump administration says the teen was handed over to immigration authorities and released. In March, the Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement revised its policy to discourage and prohibit pregnant teens from having abortions. House Republicans unveil a stripped-down spending bill to avoid a looming government shutdown. The bill includes nearly $3 billion for Children's Health Insurance Program, or CHIP, a big issue for Democrats. Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi says Republicans are getting the money from the wrong place.
They're taking money out of the prevention fund to the extent that it would be harmful to children. And we said that's just wrong. So we've been engaged for the last couple of months, or several weeks at least, on bipartisan conversation on how we can fund this in a better way.
President Trump says Pelosi and her party are guilty of obstruction. He tweets, House Democrats want a shutdown for the holidays in order to distract from the very popular just passed tax cuts. House Republicans don't let this happen, pass the CR today, and keep our government open. Minnesota Democratic Senator Al Franken will leave the Senate on January 2nd. Lieutenant Governor Tina Smith will join the Senate the following day. Speculation about when he would step down has continued since he announced his resignation this month amid sexual misconduct allegations. Control of Virginia's legislature could be decided by pulling a name out of a hat. It's the only way to settle a tie in a race in Newport News. The winner will determine if the ruling body will be a majority Republican or split at 50-50. A three-panel judge on Wednesday says the 94th District recount ended in a draw at 11,608 votes each. An initial recount appeared to give Democrat Shelley Simmons a one-vote victory over Republican delegate David Yancey, but the GOP won a court battle, adding one to Yancey's total. A federal appeals court denies the Archdiocese of Washington's bid to place a Christmas advertisement in the city's public transportation. The judge says D.C.'s Metro Transit Authority has the right not to run the Find the Perfect Gift ad because it is explicitly religious. An SUV collides with pedestrians in Melbourne, Australia, injuring at least 18.
I work on Elizabeth. I'm promoting outside there, and I just hear this big sound like an explosion, screaming. I sprinted down seconds after the crash, and it's just bodies just everywhere.
Police say the attack was deliberate, but they do not think it's terror-related. 2 men have been arrested, including the driver. At least 4 are dead and 7 are missing after a ferry capsizes in the Philippines, but fishermen and rescue boats saved more than 200. Passengers say large waves and strong winds forced the vessel to sink. Voters in Catalonia today are deciding whether to support political parties that want to turn the region into Europe's newest country or keep it as part of Spain. Opinion polls show the race is neck and neck. More than 68% of the region voted, up 5 points from the last election in 2015. Spain disbanded the previous Catalan government after it declared the region's independence following an illegal referendum. A ceasefire in South Sudan is set to take effect on Christmas Eve. The country is entering its 5th year of a devastating civil war. The fighting has led to widespread famine, with more than 1 million people on the brink of starvation. Both sides have also agreed to allow humanitarian aid to arrive. Coming up, strong words. Pope Francis has a warning for Vatican officials during a Christmas greeting. And preparing the way of the Lord. We talk with an expert who tells us why Advent is so important. Pope Francis is set to honor Padre Pio by visiting the saint's hometown and a hospital he founded. Next year marks the 50th anniversary of Pio's death and the 100th anniversary of his receiving wounds on his feet, hands, and side, corresponding to those Jesus suffered in crucifixion. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. Pope Francis once again challenges Vatican officials not to be tempted by ambition and vanity.
A Roma è come pulire la Sfinge di Egitto.
Francis has made it a tradition to give the Curia a tough love Christmas greeting. He invited the Vatican bureaucrats who help govern the church to examine their consciences before the new year. The Pope did acknowledge the competent and even saintly people who work in the Holy See. Our Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley caught up with the head of the Vatican press office, Greg Burke. He says the Holy Father was not reprimanding anyone, but asking his advisors to do better.
Greg Burke, thank you so much for joining us as head of the Holy See press office. So tell me, how do you feel your boss treated you all today?
Today was Christmas greetings, and I took them as that. I thought he treated us pretty well. He surprised everyone a few years ago because the Christmas greetings came with a little bit of let's say a strong encouragement to do things better. He talked about the sicknesses, which can take over in a bureaucracy. But I thought today was much more positive, and it was actually, if you look at the beginning and the end, it was a call to use Christmas to go deeper in your faith.
Now, some say the yearly Christmas greeting is an annual reprimand. So which of the pontiff's words struck you most today?
The line was the funny line. He said, reform in Rome is sort of like cleaning one of these great big Egyptian monuments, the Sphinx, right next to the pyramids, with a toothbrush. So that certainly made me laugh, and it struck me.
Let's look at that toothbrush and Sphinx analogy. Who is he blaming for this?
I don't think he's blaming anyone. I think he's saying this is what the situation is. Okay, This is what the situation is. If you have to change a culture, it doesn't happen overnight, and it's more than changing a structure. It's an internal thing. What has to change is we have to change. He talked about conspiracies today, plots, let's say, and cliques. He said this is not about looking for power, and that's been a constant theme. This is about service. Now, it's funny because I think a lot of times people are shocked or surprised that the Pope would talk about these things. But if you go back to the Gospel, Christ says the apostles, what were you talking about? And they're silent. And why were they silent? They were talking about who was the greatest. Okay, and these were people living right next to Jesus Christ, all of whom died for the faith. Essentially, almost all of them died for the faith. Well, fine. So they learned the lesson. The lesson can obviously be learned.
Finally, the Holy Father spoke of how the Vatican should treat the outside world. What is it that he would really like to see?
Respect for yourself and respect for the others. Christian unity is very hopeful on that. He says it's a mystery, how we're going to get over our differences, but let's move ahead. And I thought the whole diplomacy was interesting. He really gave sort of a pat on the back to the Vatican Diplomatic Corps and the hard work they do in building bridges in complicated times. And I think what the Pope wants there is what he calls the culture of encounter and dialogue. Our way forward is working together. It's not in clashing with others.
Greg Burke, head of the Vatican press office, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.
And thanks, Juliet, for that interview. Tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, host Catherine Zeltner features a pioneering young woman who has some advice for the world.
The next time they see a person with a disability, they may include them in a conversation. They may share a joke or the latest gossip.
Dawn Parcott is the first student with multiple disabilities to attend the University of Notre Dame and has a long list of accomplishments. To see the entire interview, watch Pro-Life Weekly tonight at 10 Eastern on EWTN. Pro-Life Weekly re-airs Sunday morning at 10. This week we've been sharing some of your nativity scenes with our viewers, and as we get closer to Christ's birth, we want to share just a few more with you. James Pratt shows us his Christmas creche, which is more than 25 years old. Collie Johnson sent us this Polish nativity set. And finally, this special one is from Sister Therese Marie Mueller from the Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother in Wisconsin. We're told this one is a traditional German nativity scene, complete with handcrafted bedding and an infant Jesus she's had for more than 40 years. She left a message saying, Jesus, splendor of the Father, brightness of eternal light. Up next, Mass Alert. This weekend marks a rarity for the faithful and their church schedule. And sounds like success. A Holy Christmas album is getting a very big honor. We honor St. Peter Canisius today on his feast day. The Jesuit priest was one of the most important figures in the Catholic Reformation in Germany in the 16th century. He's often called the second apostle of Germany and is a doctor of the church. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. The wildfires in California burning for more than 2 weeks and consuming more than 270,000 acres somehow spared a small Catholic school. St. Thomas Aquinas College suffered no serious damage.
Our gratitude goes out to those who prayed for the college during this stressful time, to all of the families that took in our students and provided them consolation and rest, food and shelter.
Michael McLean says the fire reached the perimeter of the school on all sides but did not get further. You may have read online you'll need to go to Mass twice this weekend, and it's true. Christmas falls on a Monday this year, and the church requires Catholics to attend for the fourth Sunday of Advent and Christmas. First, attending Mass Saturday evening or Sunday morning will count for your Sunday obligation. Then you'll need to attend Mass Sunday evening or midnight Mass, or of course on Monday, to count towards the Christmas Holy Day of obligation. In some dioceses, when a holy day falls near a weekend, bishops move the celebration to the weekend Mass, a 2-for-1, but that does not apply for Christmas. Now, to make matters more confusing, January 1st is normally a holy day of obligation for the solemnity of Mary, the Holy Mother of God, but since it falls on a Monday, January 1st will not be observed as a day of obligation in the U.S. Well, during the holidays, nativity scenes and Christmas trees decorate most Catholic homes, but what about Advent wreaths? As the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops says, the 4 candles symbolize the expectation and hope connected to our Lord's coming in the world as a baby. They are lit progressively to remind us we are getting closer to celebrating His birth. And to explain the significance of the Advent wreath, we're joined by Chad Pecknold, Associate Professor of Theology at Catholic University of America. Chad, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
As a professor of theology, why is it important for the faithful to celebrate or observe at least Advent?
Well, you know, right after Thanksgiving, we started hearing all the Christmas songs in the stores, and we were preparing our hearts according to a commercial Christmas. But the church actually has a different way of preparing our hearts. And all of a sudden at Mass, you might hear the Gospel readings turn to John the Baptist and making straight the path for the Lord, and penance and fasting. The early church would fast 3 times a week during the 3 or 4 weeks headed up to Christmas. So I think, in a sense, what we have to recover as Catholics is a sense that Advent is crucial preparation not only for making our presents, but actually making room for God's presence in our lives.
And you mentioned this can be challenging. I mean, you wrote about celebrating Advent in the midst of all the Christmas shopping and everything. It can be challenging. How do you do it with your family?
Well, I mean, we've had a challenge with the kids wanting a Christmas tree. Mm-hmm. They want the Christmas tree very early, like everybody else.
Right.
But we just had a humble Advent wreath, just as you saw there on the screen, with the 3 purple penitential candles. That's what the purple is for doing penance. But every Catholic knows going to confession, you experience the joy of being cleansed from your sin, of being absolved from your sin. That's the rose candle, joy. And the Christmas tree is like that rose candle. And so we bought the tree, and we talked to the kids about the Christmas tree as being like a rose candle in our living room, that we remember that God has come to save us and that this brings us great joy.
Well, it seems like having an Advent wreath really has worked for your family. Is that the similar kind of advice? What other kind of advice would you give to other Catholics?
Well, I think the Advent calendar is great for kids because it reminds them that we're waiting for someone. We're not waiting for St. Nicholas. St. Nicholas comes on December 6th. We're waiting for Jesus. And so to whisper in the kids' ears, the one we're waiting for is not St. Nicholas, though we love him and he prays for children all the time, but we're waiting for Jesus who comes to save us.
And then what about after Christmas? We have the 12 days of Christmas.
Well,
of course, shopping's still a big thing.
That's right. And in a sense, for our secular commercial Christmas, Christmas kind of ends on Christmas. At the day after Christmas, you throw your Christmas tree out. The Christmas tree should be kept up at least till Epiphany. You should keep the Christmas tree up because for Catholics, Christmas is a season of feasting, of celebration, of joy. You should have parties all throughout. There's feast days all throughout the Christmas season. You notice they're all about the martyrs because, in a sense, it's not just that God has come to be with us, it's that God wants to raise us up to himself to bear witness, and the martyrs do that preeminently.
Chad Pecknold, Associate Professor of Theology at the Catholic University of America, thanks so much for talking with us.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. Finally tonight, a group of sisters in Michigan say they are just praying, but it's the unique way they are doing it that's helping them climb the charts. For the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist, it's all about teamwork, whether it's on the soccer field or inside their Michigan convent.
It's a simple life. We are away from all the pressures of the world. So it's very unique that we have this beautiful place to come and pray and to live and to enjoy each other.
That perfect harmony also comes through in their music. The Nuns' new Christmas CD hit #1 on Billboard's classical chart. They may be sisters, but this is no act.
We're not doing it for personal glory or for the glory of the community. It's not about us. It's about him.
For them, the music is a gift to God, but also to people who can't see the sisters perform live. They don't tour, and only on rare occasions do they sing in public.
That's how we get to people's homes and are able to help them too, because they come into our own home, our chapel, our mother house here, through our music.
The Christmas album is their third, all recorded in the chapel.
You can listen to all the layers of the sisters singing, and that's what makes it so beautiful. That's what makes the CD so beautiful too, was being able to be taped there in the room.
2 of those albums topped the classical chart, success that the group's music director, Sister Joseph Andrew Bogdanowicz, says comes from a higher power.
We trust that God's going to use it the way he wants to. So when it does have success, we're like, yay, go God,
And success seems to follow the sisters wherever they go. The sisters' album, Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, Christmas with the Dominican Sisters of Mary, is now on sale. I'd also like to give a shout out to my cousin, Sister Maria Catherine, who is part of the Dominican Sisters of Mary. May God continue to bless their ministry. And that's our show for tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We're back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.